Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Continuing to take a look at the next week's slate, going back down to the Big 12 as TCU heads on the road to play Kansas State. And the Big 12 has been absolutely wild this year, right? Last week, we were talking about this BYU TCU game. TCU coming off of two really tough losses where they just didn't look like they had any sort of identity. Going to the quarterback, too. Josh Hoover, 37 to 58, 439 yards and 4 touchdowns, absolutely ripping the ball. And TCU dominates BYU at home. And then Kansas State coming off a brutal loss on the road against Oklahoma State. And they take care of Texas Tech. True freshman Avery Johnson, 5 rushing touchdowns. The Big 12 is madness, but both of these teams appear to be playing their best football heading into this one. A really interesting matchup. Excited to get into it now. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys, and especially the Big 12 fans. We've talked a ton of Big 12 football. Obviously, one of the more exciting conferences in the country. The support from you guys, it truly does mean a lot. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, would love to hear your guys' opinions in the comment section. This one's got my brain a little bit in a pretzel. Excited to get into it. Now, I want to start with Kansas State on the offensive side of the ball because we saw a massive storyline develop for the Wildcats, and that is true freshman Avery Johnson. This was one of the best quarterbacks in that 2023 class. You saw him come in at spot duty a couple times for Will Howard. They had a few packages using his legs. This was the most you've seen him play, and man, he was phenomenal. Not only was he solid through the air, I mean, 5 rushing touchdowns, extremely dynamic ball carrier. We talked about Avery Johnson a little bit this morning, kind of did a separate conversation about that quarterback room and how they're going to manage it. You're going to see Avery Johnson play against TCU, I would presume, might even be the starting quarterback. But what TCU needs to know about Avery Johnson is not only is he a threat with his own legs. I mean, this is a guy who runs a 4.56 40-yard dash time, a 4.2 20-yard shuttle, extremely dynamic with the ball in his hands. He also seems to open up the run game for Kansas State a little bit with the running backs too, right? When you have a quarterback that you have to account for in that read option, where you're legitimately nervous about the big play that he can do out in space, it gives those running backs a little bit more room. And that's kind of what you saw against Texas Tech, right? Trayshawn Ward goes over 100 yards. DJ Giddens had a nice game. Kansas State wants to run the football. There's no secret about that. They've run the ball 54% of the offensive snaps they had. And Avery Johnson, I mean, boy, does he bring just another element to this Kansas State team. Now, what I would like to see a little bit more of in terms of the passing game is giving Avery Johnson, not more of. They did this, I thought, really well against Texas Tech. I guess I'd say I'd like to see them continue to do this. Give him some of those easy throws, right? This is still a true freshman at the end of the day. And you have 2 really nice targets who are very presentable, quarterback-friendly guys, right? Phillip Brooks, just get the ball into his hands, whether it's screens, whether it's quick outs, quick slants. Anytime Phillip Brooks gets the football in space, that's where he's at his best. And then you got a tight end in Ben Sinnott who, the first word I'd say dog. I mean, you talk about Ben Sinnott blocking. I'm sure Kansas State fans know what I'm talking about when Avery Johnson keeps the ball, pancakes one guy, goes and gets the second level defender. Ben Sinnott, not only a great pass catcher, but a great offensive weapon for this Kansas State offense. This is going to be a hard game for TCU to kind of game prep for, because I'm not sure you know what you're going to get. Will Howard, Avery Johnson. Will Howard can use his legs, not nearly to the extent Avery Johnson can. And you might see both quarterbacks, and you're not really sure how much of those quarterbacks you're going to see. This is a very difficult game for TCU's defense to prep for this week. Now, TCU on the defensive side of the ball, this was the TCU defense under Joe Gillespie that got them to a national title last year, right? Flying around the football, creating turnovers, had a pick six, had a strip sack. I think it starts up front. Like watching that film back, Dominic Williams, true sophomore nose tackle. You talk about Kansas State wanting to run the football, having a guy who can hold up on the inside, eat up double teams, get some penetration. That's the best way you can stop this Kansas State rushing attack. And Dominic Williams, I thought, was really, really good against BYU. Another matchup that I kind of like for TCU is they like to play speed. Like Kansas State with Avery Johnson, they're going to try to attack the perimeter. That's where TCU's at their best. I mean, they got some really athletic linebackers, Jamoy Hodge, Nandi, who can get out to the sideline. As a Michigan fan, we saw that against TCU last year. Really excited to see if you can see Kansas State get out in space and how well this TCU handled that, because again, that 3-3-5 defense allows you to have a little bit more speed and get out to the perimeter. This is going to be a really intriguing battle. Again, best defensive performance you've seen from TCU going up against the Kansas State offense. This is a very dangerous offense with Avery Johnson at the helm. Now, flipping sides of the ball, I was really low on this TCU team. I, in fact, picked BYU, outright to beat TCU last weekend. I wasn't really optimistic about Josh Hoover, the backup quarterback for TCU. What does Josh Hoover do? 37 to 58, 439 yards, 4 touchdowns. He threw 2 picks, but this dude is a straight up gunslinger. You see the baseball. He was a pitcher in high school. You see that background and how he slings that rock around. Absolutely laser beams to these wide receivers. And you look at this TCU offense, getting a lot of pass catchers involved, but you're starting to see the guys emerge, right? J.P. Richardson, kind of that go-to wide receiver in this TCU offense. Savion Williams had a really good game. You had 13 pass catchers catch footballs for TCU against BYU. By far the best this offense has looked all year with their backup quarterback, Josh Hoover, who, again, the arm talent is there. You thought TCU wants to spread you out, attack all areas of that field. Josh Hoover has 100% the arm to attack all sides of the field. And don't get me wrong, like TCU can run the football too. I think their best player on the offensive side of the ball is running back Amani Bailey. It's a dude who was really good last year, who was just buried in the depth chart. Kendra Miller and D. Micardo off to the NFL. Amani Bailey has taken over this running back room and been extremely dynamic. Now, Kansas State on the defensive side of the ball, very solid. I think losing that linebacker, Daniel Green, we talked about it. That hurts, but Khalid Duke up front. Austin Moore's been playing really good at that linebacker spot. You have some good guys in the secondary. Kansas State, just all lines of that defensive line, backers in the back end, really, really good. One of the more solid, well-coached defenses that you'll see, and it'll present some opportunities for Josh Hoover. Now, getting to kind of the pick, and the line's been bouncing around a little bit. Right now, we got Kansas State as a touchdown favorite against TCU at home. This one is so hard to get a read on. I think a lot of Kansas State and TCU fans probably agree the same, right? TCU fans 7 days ago were not feeling very optimistic about where this team is going, right? Quarterback 1, Chandler Morris, goes down. They look really, really bad against Iowa State and West Virginia, and then turn around and blow the doors off of a solid BYU team. And the same thing for Kansas State, right? A really ugly game in Stillwater. Now, I'm going to rock with Kansas State, and for this reason. One, at home, you got that 2-quarterback system that I think is going to be really hard for TCU's defense to deal with in terms of prepping for 2 different quarterbacks that can do 2 different kind of things. And at the end of the day, you take away that Kansas State loss on the road in Stillwater, where it was just a really sloppy game, kind of a rare game under the Chris Kleiman regime in Kansas State. I mean, this is a team that's only other loss is on the road against Missouri, who is absolutely dominating and looking like a legitimate top 15 team. In Kansas State, I mean, 6 times out of 10 probably wins that football game on the road. I get it's easy to count Kansas State out after how ugly it looked in Stillwater a couple weeks ago, but they bounced back in a big way. I still think this team is really good. And again, you asked me the dark horse to potentially be that 3rd team outside of Texas and Oklahoma to kick it around for that Big 12 championship. I think it's Kansas State. I think they're complete on both sides of the ball, have a little bit of new life on the offensive side of the ball. This one is going to be good. And I've been wrong about both of these teams for the last couple of weeks, but I think you're going to see some good offensive play for both of the new quarterbacks, Josh Hoover, Avery Johnson. Really excited for this one. Just have a feeling there are going to be some fireworks in this one. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.